It is now my honor to introduce another public servant who is working tirelessly to support our state's small farmers. A.G. Kawamura is the Secretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. He is a produce grower and shipper from Orange County, where his family grows strawberries, green beans, and other specialty crops. He's widely known for his passion for education and his commitment to issues of hunger and nutrition. At the time of his appointment as Secretary of Agriculture, he was a member of the California State Board of Food and Agriculture, where he had served since 1998. We are very honored to have Secretary Kawamura join us last year at our conference in Sacramento, and grateful that he is able to join us again this year. So please welcome the Secretary of California Department of Food and Agriculture, A.G. Kawamura.
Thank you, Al. Good afternoon, everybody. Boy, good afternoon, everybody. I like that. There we go. I know we're all eating, and keep on eating, please. I want to just say, Al, thank you for your leadership. I know Alan has been a center point of this organization, and I want to just thank you for your great support and more importantly, moving this organization into really a whole new century. Thank you very much. And when I talk about the 21st century, maybe that's really what this is all about. What is the 21st century role for small farmers, for large farmers, for all farmers really on the planet? I had a chance just in December to go to Copenhagen for the climate summit there. And the reason many of us were there was we felt that nobody was talking about agriculture. Everybody was talking about the changing climate, the challenges of what kind of energy system we might have to work, what kind of car we should drive. But I got to tell you, very few people have been talking about, well, what happens to agriculture when you have unpredictable weather? And I think all of us know unpredictable weather means unpredictable harvest. Interestingly, just a few weeks after I got back, I had a chance to be in Orlando, Florida, and it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and it was 30 degrees in Orlando, Florida. And they had just suffered one of the longest, not the coldest day. They had plenty of days that were colder at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but they had just suffered through really one of the longest durations of continuous freeze that they had ever seen, they had ever had in Florida. That's a weather change. We saw a lot of friends from Australia when I was in Copenhagen. They have a 12-year drought, and their farm gate has dropped 50%. That's a weather change. Those are the kinds of things that we're really looking at. In fact, it's a kind of a reality check. An enormous reality check in terms of what's going to happen. You can imagine right here if we were starting to get into the front end of a long-term drought here in California, or if we started to see spikes in temperature. I just lost this last summer. We had an unprecedented for us in Orange County. I farm just less than an hour north of here. We had 10 straight days are above 98 degrees. I have green beans growing. We lost basically the fields that I had bloom and small fruit out on the bean plants. We lost 50% of it. It just melted it, and we burned it all up. And I can tell you that if that's the norm, if these temperature swings become the norm over time, spikes up and down, durations, that's the kind of thing that I think all of us would recognize can throw you and can really shut down an operation in your area over a very short period of time. It's sobering. And so one of the things that we also saw, and this is interesting because you see it globally, of course, is that agriculture is the intersection, and one of the fellows from the World Bank made this comment, Mark Kackler from the World Bank made this comment that agriculture is the intersection where food security, poverty, and climate come together. And you'll see that it's interesting. You can be talking about Africa when you make that statement, but you can also be talking about that right here in San Diego or right here in the United States. And what's interesting is, as you start to see this 21st century unfold, I can see that there's a lot of efforts by a lot of people to define what is agriculture. How many of you have seen the film Food, Inc.? Just out of curiosity. Handfuls. How many of you read Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma? A few more hands go up. What's interesting, there is this enormous effort to try and define agriculture under kind of a generalized term. And the one thing I think for myself, being a grower, but also being secretary here in California, that I understand very clearly is it's almost impossible to define agriculture with a generalized statement other than the fact that we all hope to produce something from the land, we all hope to harvest it, we all hope to, hopefully sell it and have a profit left over. And there's some commonalities. We would all agree about the commonalities, but when you look at the kind of agriculture that takes place in the Midwest, when you look at the kind of agriculture that takes here in this amazing place called California, and then certainly if you look at agriculture in a place like Africa, you can really clearly see that as much as there's this tendency to try and wrap it up and put it into a nice, easy sentence about what agriculture and food production and fuel production and fiber production is all about, it's not so easy. In fact, it's becoming more and more difficult in some ways, but the same things come about. The idea that you want to know your farmer and you want to know your food. I see what's happening from my point of view is there are a lot of folks that don't want to necessarily be defined by someone else's opinion. They have very clear ideas of who they are, what they're doing. I'm speaking, of course, about the Midwest grower. I'm speaking, of course, about the European grower. Europeans that are in the food production business, and certainly I can say that those of us who are from California, we're very proud of what we do here. And as much as it's important for the public to know about your food, and it's then important for the public to know about your farmer, they don't know about climate, they don't know about your soil, they don't know about pests, they don't know about the vulnerability, and more importantly, they don't understand necessarily the potentiality that we all have, especially here in California. So let me kind of funnel back down to California and just talk about our diversity here. In fact, diversity is the best word to describe California agriculture. We have a climate, if you will, for every commodity. In fact, if you look on the world, on the globe, in California, you have subtropical to desert, you have high elevation to low elevation, coastal plains. We actually say that we really don't have tropical agricultural production here, but the hemp growers that have been growing inside of greenhouses for years, that's kind of a tropical environment, and they're actually really good at it. And in fact, hopefully they'll become one of our new specialty crops and we can get some taxes out of them. We keep on saying that, but you have to know, though, in California, for example, California, because we have the privilege or what would be looked at as, at one point, as a disadvantage of not having water, we deliver water, and we have 2.3 million acres of California agriculture, as an example, under drip irrigation. And out of the 9-point-something million acres of cultivated acres in California, over 6 million of those acres are irrigated. And we're one of the rare places on this planet, if you looked at the value of our California crop, 90% of the value of California's agriculture comes from irrigated agriculture. If you go to the Midwest, 85% of the crop in the Midwest is rain-fed. If you go to Africa, 95% of the agriculture in Africa is rain-fed. They hope it rains. They wish for steady patterns. They expect and they hope that these things will continue, and that's the way they look at agriculture. Here in California, we don't do that. We really do things quite a bit differently, and this idea that we turn water on and off and manage it to create the best possible outcome in our cropping patterns, that's our advantage. And when we don't have water, we must have a plan B. When we don't have reliable, predictable, dependable, quality water, we better have a plan B. Here in San Diego last year, in the last 2 years, they actually cut down perfectly good avocado trees. Perfectly good avocado trees were cut down, were stumped here, because they didn't have a good plan B in place. It wasn't that we didn't have water, we didn't have a management tool, we didn't have a plan B in place to make sure that some of those growers could have got some of that water and kept those trees up and around when you actually had a pretty damn good market. And so we recognize that investing in our future a lot of times is more than just investing in a pump or a deeper well. It's investing in the policies that you better have in place to give yourself some more predictability in your outcome. Those of you who are citrus growers in the audience, I know you're a little bit terrified because we have an Asian citrus psyllid problem that is coming up and around from Florida. We, knock on wood, that's metal, knock on wood, we hope we don't get the citrus disease called Wanlong called citrus greening, because that will kill your tree. But the fact that we have this psyllid is in our state causes all kinds of concern for those of you with a long-time vision of staying in the citrus business. And so it's a time right now, for example, then to invest in your own future by making sure you have some plan B, plan C, some ways to go about making sure that you ensure your future a little bit better.